Everybody. This morning we're going to have Julie Parker. She is from Prince George's County, Maryland Police Department. She's going to be speaking today about managing the traditional media via social media during an officer-involved shooting. Julie has been with Prince George's County Police Department for about 4 years. A lot of history or background experience in media. She spent 13 years reporting and anchoring in Washington, D.C. So we think she has a lot of valuable information for us this morning. So please help me welcome Julie Parker.
Thank you. Good morning. Sorry about the delay. It's a lot of buildup. Don't get too excited. It's really not all that. It was just some sort of computer malfunction. That is not my strong suit. My name is Julie Parker, and I am a recovering television news reporter. I've been in media relations on this side of the microphone for about 4 years, but for the better part of my career, I worked in TV news. I started at C-SPAN, where I learned the true definition of fair and balanced coverage, because no matter which side of the aisle was talking, the other side of the aisle said we were biased. So I learned very quickly how it works. And then I went on to Hagerstown TV station there in Western Maryland, where I was a one-man band and did everything in television news, including being the janitor. I mean, writing, reporting, anchoring, shooting, you name it, I did it all. Not your kind of shooting, our kind of shooting. And then I went to Washington, D.C. and spent 14 years there between News Channel 8, a 24-hour news station, and WJLA, which is the ABC affiliate in Washington, D.C. So I come to this job as the Media Relations Division Director with that mindset, for better or for worse. And I've tried to take the reporting mentality and bring it into a police department. And I found that that has worked very well. The benefits of having a reporter in this position is that that person knows what a deadline means. And that person knows when a reporter is freaking out because they need information, that it's not just some whiny reporter who has their agenda. It's a person who is under a lot of pressure in their job. And one of the things I've noticed, and most police officers don't like to hear this, is that reporters and cops have a lot in common. The TV people are okay with me saying that, but the cops not so much. But basically, you're coming from two professions where they're adrenaline driven. There's a lot of need to be attentive to detail, and you want to get it right. And you're both under a lot of pressure. So I always keep that in mind and try to, for my sworn friends and sworn commanders who have to deal with reporters, I try to make them think about that the news folks are under a lot of pressure. I want you to take a look at these 3 images. I'm not going to keep them on the screen very long. And as you see them, call out whatever comes to mind, whether it be a description of what you're seeing or a place or anything. I want to see how recognizable these images are to you. Louder. You guys are quiet. LA. I couldn't tell. I think you're a shy group. For the most part, did you recognize the images that you were seeing? Which to me, as I'm researching them to find the right images and to put them in this presentation, I wanted to see how quickly they would become, that they would come on your radar, how quickly you'd recognize what those images were. And for better or for worse, that's where we are today, that these photos stand out so dramatically to you. It's just a frame. You're not watching a video. It's just a frame, and they have a huge impact. And what we're going to talk today about is how we in our office manage the traditional media with officer-involved shootings. And we do it first and foremost through social media, because that's where everything spreads. You know this. I'm preaching to the choir. That's where it starts. And more, what we're seeing in Washington, D.C. and its suburbs is that the story will grow legs digitally, and then it hits the traditional media, right? Sometimes you'll get your reporters on scene first, but very often it's now a citizen saying, there's a shooting in my community, there are a bunch of cops here. And it spreads so quickly. And your offices have to be so responsive to that. And there's so much involved, as you know. It's not just the media relations piece, it's the digital piece. Like our last presenter showed you, they've got a robust media relations team that includes a digital media manager. Not all departments can afford this and don't have the personnel to do this. They're fortunate in Harris County that they have that. We do our best with our office to stay on top of that digital front, but it's challenging. We've got a combination of sworn and civilians in my office, and the sworn officers, by and large, are excellent at that, presenting to the media what happened from a police department standpoint. But the social part is not second nature to the guys that I have in my office. Some are better than others, some are working on it, but monitoring and sort of digging deep to find out what people are saying to you if they're not mentioning at PGPD News, that doesn't come so easily to them. So that sort of falls more to the civilian side of things. And when you've got something like an officer-involved shooting, you really do need all hands on deck. Unfortunately, as we all know, you don't always get that, particularly when it's 2 o'clock in the morning, right? And at least in our community, if there's an officer-involved shooting, very often that's when those situations are occurring. So I wrote this article for law officer rather, talking about one period where we had 2 officer-involved shootings within 24 hours of each other. And when I got the call 12 hours after the first, I said, are we talking about whatever the address was? Are we talking about the first one? No, this is a new one. And so we had to be very careful about distinguishing between which officer-involved shooting we were speaking about, because you can imagine the confusion that could then ensue. So getting out early in front of your story, as you know, is so key. You cannot be behind the 8 ball in 2015 when it comes to an officer-involved shooting. Can I get an amen? Yes, we know this, okay. Here are questions that we have found are absolutely critical, that may seem obvious, or maybe there's something here that doesn't. So I tried to highlight in yellow the key points for this. How, when, and where are you going to announce an officer-involved shooting? And by how, I mean, are you going to wait till you get to the scene and announce it there, relying on channel 4, 5, and 7 to get your message out? Or are you going to do it from your phone before you head out to the scene at 3 o'clock in the morning? How are you going to announce it? When? Do you want to wait? Do you not know enough information at the time that you feel comfortable tweeting out as soon as it happens, or Facebook, or whatever you're using for social media, or your website? Do you want to wait till you get to the scene? And can you, in your communities, because it varies depending on your media market and the size of your community, can you afford to wait till you get to the scene? These are questions you have to ask yourself. And where are you going to announce it? Headquarters? At the scene? Some other location? Will you break the news, or will the media? For our office, it is my mission always for us to break the news. I'm almost competitive with my former colleagues. I want to own whatever the news is, good or bad. I want us to be the source. And the way for us to be the source of our story, it's to tell it first, before it can start taking an inaccurate turn. Who's going to handle the interviews? Again, that's going to depend on your department and who speaks on these matters. Sometimes the actual nature of your officer-involved shooting may dictate who speaks. Should it be the chief of police? Should it be the on-call PIO? For us, it's typically me. We'll have a PIO go out to the scene to help manage. Perfect example, where are you going to put the reporters? The PIO will handle that while I'm talking with the head of internal affairs while I'm talking to deputy chiefs and perhaps the chief about what happened, how much can we say. I'm always pushing to say more. That's just the reporter in me, and I've got my commanders who try to rein me in. How much detail will you provide is a critical question. We're going to get into that a little bit later. And due to the sensitivity of the nature of these investigations, that's always a challenge. Sometimes you, in the Media Relations Division, have to fight to get more information because you know, based on what you do, that certain aspects of that investigation have to come out early. Even if it makes some a little uncomfortable, you know from a media standpoint, you have got to get it out early, and you have got to be the one getting it out. How close will you allow reporters to get to the scene is something we're going to go into later. When I first got to the department, and as being a reporter who used to cover the department, one of my frustrations was, why are you keeping me a half mile away? What is the purpose of keeping a reporter that far back? Do you need to? Is it convenient for you to? Is it a little to the media to keep you that far away? My mission was always, how close can we allow reporters to get without jeopardizing the investigation, without getting in the way? We worked very hard internally from media relations with our command staff to allow reporters closer access in general, not just to officer-involved shootings, but in general, to crime scenes. Because unless there's a reason why they can't, let's let them get closer. That's one simple way to build better media relations. And then finally, who's going to monitor social media for the rumors, inaccuracies, and blatantly incorrect headlines or blatantly biased headlines? That's an ongoing thing from the moment that officer-involved shooting occurs until 24 hours, whenever that story is sort of put to bed. Who's going to keep an eye on how your story is being told? It's really important that you do that, and it's really important to correct your traditional media when there's an obvious slant in the way they're reporting the story. At any point in this presentation, please feel free to stop me, ask questions, and share any personal stories that you've dealt with that haven't gone well. I prefer to stop and talk about it as happening rather than wait till the end. We're big in our office on tweeting updates. As a former journalist, I was the Twitter geek in the Channel 7 newsroom. When that concept of being able to put out these micro bursts of information with photos was, brought to my attention, I thought, how is this not a huge tool for reporters? But it was so early that it was just more of a techie geek thing. Well, look who's laughing now, because what reporter is not on social media? What reporter is not tweeting? We tweet our updates because we're talking directly to the reporters who are going to cover our story. And we want to make sure that they're getting timely and accurate information from us so that they can then spread our news to the hundreds of thousands of people who are following them. What these points result in, we think, and what we have found, is that we get fair media coverage as a result.
At first, at 11, a wild chain of events for some Prince George's County police officers. There were two separate officer-involved shootings in a matter of hours. One was in Capitol Heights. The second one was in Clinton. Robert Lyles is following both investigations from police headquarters. Robert, what have you learned?
Well, Candace, tonight, Prince George's County Police say that its officers were forced to open fire first just before daybreak, and that shooting ended in a fatality. Then, just after the noon hour, and that ended with two suspects now in critical but stable condition.
I kept hearing pow, 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 like 5 shots.
Clinton's Temple Hill Road was turned into a shooting gallery, say homeowners.
It was more than a couple.
The shots were coming from police officers who'd responded to the modest white home in the 8600 block.
I didn't see anybody. And I said, well, something's not right here.
What she didn't know, police had received a frantic 911 call from the renter saying someone was trying to break in.
She was actually calling 911 as one of these male suspects was trying to force his way inside.
Neighbors say it was the woman's boyfriend and father of her youngest child, a relationship that had grown increasingly volatile.
My daughter's telling me she heard arguments late in the night, carrying out into the yard and fussing and carrying on.
In fact, police say they responded to several calls for service at this home in the past. So they raced here today, finding a man running from the front door and another man waiting curbside. When officers attempted to stop that car
flees at a high rate of speed towards the officers, and actually strikes one of the officers.
Both officers then opened fire.
Both of the suspects who were inside that car who we shot at have both been struck by gunfire.
Hours earlier, PG police say another officer was forced to open fire near Marlboro Pike and Lee J. Drive, killing 24-year-old Robert Jones of Forestville. Police say neighbors reported hearing gunshots. When they encountered Jones, he was allegedly reaching for a gun in his waistband. But back in Clinton, police have a mystery unfolding. They still don't know how both suspects made it from Clinton to two separate hospitals in two separate vehicles. Now tonight, the officer involved with the car accident, we're told, is expected to make a full recovery. The officer involved in that fatal shooting is now on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Police tell us tonight that that is standard in a fatal shooting. That is the latest live from Palmer Park. ABC 7 News.
All right, Rob.
What were your takeaways from that story? Because if you have the neighbors saying it's a shooting gallery, and pow, 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 and then you don't have the police voice, you know, God help you, right? Anyone else? Any words that stood out to you about what the police were forced to do? Hi. The phrase forced is something we wrote, we tweeted, we wrote in our release, because it is A, accurate, and B, the kind of language that we anticipated the media would pick up on. And it worked. We're not making things up. When we put out our releases, when we tweet what we're tweeting, none of it is inaccurate. But we, with our former media brains, try to think about phrasing and words that they use and incorporate it into our writing. Overall, would you argue that that is a fair presentation, fair representation of what occurred? And what are your thoughts on the sworn officer who is my former lieutenant, his demeanor, how he comes across? Horrible? Credible? Yeah, I think in general he is he comes across, because he is, a likable, knowledgeable, articulate, intelligent representation and a good representation for our department. So those things matter. We talked about who's going to deliver your message. Think about those things. So what we always try to do, and that word or that phrasing, an officer was forced to shoot, forced to discharge his duty weapon, paint the picture that you're seeing from your scene. And don't forget about your officers and how they're affected by that shooting, even if they aren't critically injured. You heard in the last story that the officer was hit by the car. It wasn't a mortal injury. The car, hit him on the leg as it drove out. He got checked out. He was fine, but don't leave that out of your conversation because it's relevant. No, he was hit by a car at this scene. He was hit by a car driven by the suspect. Don't forget about your officers, even if in your head, okay, he's good, that's not a central part of the story. No, it does matter. And it certainly matters for the community who's listening to how all of this is playing out. So we make sure that we include those things. When we talk about an officer-involved shooting, later we make sure that if that officer was taken to the hospital for his leg injury, we tell the community, hey, he's out, he's doing better. And the response we get is uplifting, people saying, thank God, Great to hear it. Thanks for keeping us updated. This was in one of our releases, and the words highlighted in yellow: the suspects were determined to flee, and they used their car as a weapon. I can't tell you how many times the phrase "they used their car as a weapon" came up in the media's coverage of this story, because what does it do? What does that phrasing do? So quiet. It paints the picture, right? You get a better idea instead of coming across as maybe more professional and speaking in an investigative tone. If you make the conversation more relaxed, more conversational, more people, I would argue, are likely to get the story that you're sharing with your community. It's more relatable than if you've got someone who is speaking in a very professional, but albeit very law enforcement centric tone. Does everyone get what I mean by that? There's no disrespect whatsoever. It's two different ways of speaking to your audience. And in this case, your audience is the traditional media, who's not from a law enforcement background, as you well know, and your community, some of whom have police backgrounds, but some of whom don't.
And a police-involved shooting here in Maryland is our big local story tonight. A 3-year-old girl is dead and 2 adults are in the hospital after a shooting spree in Prince George's County. Police killed the man during a shootout. 11 News reporter Karen Campbell joins us live in the studio with the very latest on this story. Karen.
Well, Kai, police say the 2 people who were shot are believed to be the little girl's maternal grandparents. Investigators are trying to figure out why the suspect would allegedly abduct his own daughter and get into a shootout with police on a busy roadway.
This was the scene in Prince George's County Saturday afternoon. Police say a man led them on a high-speed chase with his 3-year-old daughter in the car after he allegedly shot and wounded 2 people in their home in the 4200 block of Farmers Place in Camp Springs. Those victims are described by police as the little girl's maternal grandparents. Officers say the suspect had allegedly come to the home to kidnap his daughter. Police say when they found the suspect, he grabbed the girl, got into a car, sped off, and started shooting at officers.
We understand that during the pursuit, the suspect actually loses a wheel off of his car. He's continuing to drive with a -1 wheel.
Investigators say 5 Prince George's County police officers and 1 state trooper was involved in the shootout.
He does stop briefly at Beach Road and Branch Avenue, which is just down the street from us. An exchange of gunfire occurs there between him and some officers. He then gets back in his car and continues to drive, where you see he's come to a stop now. There is an additional exchange of gunfire there.
Police say they returned fire, killing the man. When officers searched the vehicle, they found a heartbreaking discovery. The little girl had been shot. Police say they don't know when and don't know by who.
I've never seen anything like this before, for real. So it's kind of like, all new to me, but it's just still kind of like surreal.
This is the 3rd toddler to die by gunfire this month. Police say a man opened fire on a house in Landover, killing Kanijah Bibb. The man responsible turned himself in. Mackenzie Elliott was shot by a stray bullet as she sat on the porch of a neighbor's home in Baltimore City. That case is still under investigation.
Now, the officers involved in the shooting earlier today are expected to be placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. We will continue to follow the story and bring you the very latest developments as we get them. In the studio, Karen Campbell, WBAL TV 11 News.
So that's the Baltimore market covering us. We're in the Washington, D.C. TV market. And very often when we get a story that's big enough, they'll come down and cover us. What was your takeaway from this story? Anything stand out? Alleged. What about the magnitude of the actual crime itself? How complicated and big it was. You've got 3 crime scenes you've got murder, you've got a little girl involved, you've got multiple officers involved in this officer-involved shooting, you've got the suspect killed. It was insanity. And of course, just ask Harris County, who went before me, it happens on a 97-degree day It happens in this case on Saturday. I'm on leave. My media strategist, who's a former journalist, is on leave. And Lieutenant Alexander is just home 3 hours from a 2-week vacation. You never know, obviously, when these things are going to occur. There's someone in that video who is a high-ranking member of our department who showed up to the scene, credit where credit is due, but he showed up on a Saturday coming from I don't know where, and he's in shorts and a t-shirt. And I'm sure he never expected he'd be on camera. He's not talking. He's going to the scene. It's craziness. He's going to go out and support his people. But he's on camera in his shorts and his t-shirt. Not ideal, right? I think Sherry's going to get into, in her presentation, the flack that her chief got for what he wore during a crisis. It may seem minute, but some people will become very upset about it. So something that I always tell my chief, and he now does, and it wasn't my chief, is keep a spare uniform in your car. Keep it there always. You never know where you're going to be when something major is going to strike. What are you going to do if you're in shorts and a t-shirt? And you don't have time. It's big enough. Sherry will tell you, it's big enough. You don't have time to go home and get your uniform. Or if you're a civilian, to get out of your tank top and capri pants from your workout and go find something decent to wear. So that's my number one takeaway. Have like a go bag in my car. More painting the picture with words and also tweets. There's an officer involved shooting. The 911 call comes in. There's a guy with a long gun in my apartment. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. Apartment complex, sorry. I see him outside. He's got a long gun. The officers arrive, patrol officers, order the man to drop the weapon. He does not. He's struck and killed. These are the weapons that were recovered from the scene. They are pellet guns. The writing we used when we released this is that pellet guns, such as the ones recovered today in Suitland, are often manufactured to look as realistic as possible. We had a bit of an internal debate about whether to show the photos of the pellet guns. Who in the room would say, no, you don't show those pellet guns? No one? Well, you all would have been on my side then. We had some internal debate, and there was concern among some that by releasing photos of evidence in this case, we were going to create this slippery slope where every officer involved shooting or homicide or you name the crime moving forward, we would then have to show the weapon involved. And I argued, no, we don't. We are doing the community a service by showing them what our officer saw at 2 o'clock in the morning. Even if it wasn't 2 o'clock in the morning, I would bet some of you would say, it's really hard to tell. So we wanted to paint the picture for everyone involved about what these officers were facing. Oh, God.
Looks like the real thing, but police say this is actually a pellet gun. That mix-up cost a man his life in an apartment complex in Suitland. Tonight, we're learning new details about that man who was shot and killed by police. Pat Collins has been at the scene all day with reaction from residents. Pat?
Marine police have identified the deceased here as 20-year-old Mark Anthony Blocker. He lived where he died.
When you have a long rifle and you don't know if it's a bullet or a pellet gun, you're going to do what you have to do.
Police say this is the gun the man was holding when he was shot and killed by 2 officers in the dark hours of the morning. It turned out to be a pellet gun, but police say it closely resembles an assault rifle, and they say the man refused to put it down. This is a picture of a real assault rifle. We put it alongside the pellet gun. Similarities? Take a look for yourself.
but they protecting the area, and they see you with an assault rifle. They think it's, assault rifle, but pellet gun. You see what it costs you, your life.
This is how police tell the story. The scene, the Carriage Hill apartment off Branch Avenue. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning. Two men are arguing outside a building. A neighbor hears the noise and calls the cops. He tells them that one of the men appears to be holding a long gun. When the two officers arrive, they tell the guy to drop the gun. And when he refuses, they fire off a number of shots. Vance Dean lives in the building nearby. He heard the gunfire. You heard how many shots?
Only 5 bullet shots.
And then what did you do after that?
Just being cautious and, listening.
Police say the two men involved in the argument were brothers. The man holding the long gun was 20 years old. The other man described as his younger brother. Police recovered this pellet handgun from him.
The cops are scared too. They didn't know what he had, So they got a dangerous job.
This is a large gated complex. Off-duty Prince George's police sometimes work security here. No off-duty officers were working during the incident this morning. So far this year in Prince George's County, there have been 5 police-involved shootings. 2 have been fatal. Live in Prince George's County, Pat Collins, News 4.
Takeaways? We watched the story in media relations and watched the man on the street, the MOS, one after the next. And I mean, that's exactly what we want people to say. And we hope people are thinking, but you don't know it till we didn't pay Pat to put those people in there. We have a good working relationship with him. We didn't pay him for that. But, that does those officers a lot of good to hear that, right? Anything else that you noticed? Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. And Chief Schmaler was so great. The tone he took at that news conference and the empathy he showed while he was talking about what happened, both for the cops' family and for the police officers' families and what they were going through. It really, you should Google it. Anything else? Did you notice the shots of the evidence being collected and the placards? If the reporters were half mile away, could they get that? No. And even where they were, where we had them placed for us to go up and talk to them, et cetera, was still too far for them to zoom in on those guns laying in the ground. So I asked permission, any problem with us getting them right up to the tape? And I wanted to tweet it, but besides me putting it out from the department, I wanted the reporters to have that access. And then you saw in the video, you see those guns laying in the grass plain of day. Who's going to say those look fake? It's just a great example of, one more point. At one point you see Pat referencing the real gun and then our gun that we had released below it. Lieutenant Alexander, who has been in these news stories, he fed that to Pat. He just said, hey, Pat, heads up, slipped him an email, and it wound up in there. That's good media relations. We have a good working relationship with Pat. When he's covering us and our officers have done something wrong, we don't hide from him. We talk to him, we give him the information he needs. And likewise, when we have a story where we need a little help from him, that really went a long way, and it meant a lot to us, and I think it really helped tell that story. So the point of all of this is actions on your part equals results. Results with the media, but also then results from the community. They're hearing the story. Timely information, I think we've covered that. Pre-proceed, share your message exponentially. They'll do it for you. You put out the information, you continue to do it in a timely way, in an accurate way, and people will share your message. Painting the picture of the scene is key, and for us, what we have found is that the results of doing all of this, which is a lot of work, a lot goes into that, day to day to day, not just when you have a crisis, winds up with fair media coverage. Questions? Or if this can be the part where we stop streaming, Scott, and we can talk just amongst us about successes you've experienced